She lives off me, my son told his wife. She'd have nothing without my money. I stood completely still in the carpeted hallway, a basket of freshly folded laundry resting against my hip. The walls in this sprawling suburban house were thin, carrying their hushed voices directly from the master bedroom to where I stood. I am 68 years old. I have been a widow for nearly a decade. 2 years ago, when Leo and Sarah wanted to buy this 5-bedroom home, they were short on the down payment. I sold my modest marital home, handed them $80,000, and moved into the downstairs guest suite. The agreement was simple. I would contribute a set amount each month for my share of the bills and the mortgage. She left the lights on in the kitchen again. Sarah complained, the sound of a drawer slamming punctuating her sentence. We are basically subsidizing her retirement, Leo. It's exhausting. She acts like this is her house just because she occupies the bottom floor. I know, Sarah, Leo replied. His tone was placating, eager to avoid a fight with his wife. But she's my mother. What am I supposed to do? Kick her out? She'd have nothing without my money. Just let her think she's helping. I did not gasp. I did not drop the laundry basket in a dramatic fit of tears. I simply stood there, absorbing the profound weight of my son's entitlement. He genuinely believed that the $2,000 I quietly transferred into his checking account on the 28th of every month was merely a token gesture. He had convinced his wife, and perhaps himself, that he was my savior. I turned around slowly, making no sound on the plush carpet. I carried the laundry back to my suite, set the basket on the edge of my bed, and sat down at my small writing desk. I opened my laptop. It was time to show them exactly what nothing looked like. The glow of my laptop screen illuminated the dim room. I logged into my banking portal, navigating past my modest savings account to the scheduled transfers page. There it was, the recurring monthly payment of $2,000 labeled Leo, Household. I clicked the small red button that read, Cancel Scheduled Transfer. A confirmation box popped up asking if I was sure. I did not hesitate. I confirmed the cancellation, watching the page refresh. The money would stay exactly where it belonged. The next morning, I walked upstairs to the main kitchen to make my tea. Sarah was already there, aggressively wiping down the granite countertops. She paused, eyeing the carton of almond milk I pulled from the refrigerator. Grace? She began, crossing her arms over her expensive yoga jacket. We need to talk about the grocery budget. Leo and I are trying to save for a vacation, and you go through the organic milk and fresh fruit really fast. It's becoming a burden on our finances. I poured the milk into my tea, stirring it slowly. I did not argue. I did not remind her that I had paid for the entire grocery delivery just 3 days prior. You're absolutely right, Sarah, I answered mildly. I'll make sure not to touch your groceries from now on. She blinked clearly, expecting a defensive argument. When I offered none, she gave a curt nod and went back to wiping the counter. I finished my tea, washed my mug, and grabbed my purse. I drove straight to a local appliance store and purchased a sleek, quiet mini fridge. I had 2 delivery men carry it directly into my downstairs suite. I stocked it with my own milk, my own fruit, and my own meals. I stopped doing their laundry that afternoon. When I walked past the overflowing basket in the hallway, I simply stepped around it. They thought I was just being petty, completely unaware of the calendar slowly creeping toward the first of the month. Establishing boundaries within the house shifted the entire atmosphere. For a week, I kept entirely to myself. I cooked my meals on a small induction burner I set up in my suite. I cleaned only my bathroom and my living space. The dust in the upstairs hallway began to gather, and the dishes in the main kitchen sink piled up into a precarious tower. Sarah was visibly irritated, slamming cabinets and sighing loudly whenever I walked past. Leo finally came down to my suite on a Tuesday evening. He leaned against my door frame, looking perfectly comfortable in the home I had helped purchase. Mom? The house is a mess, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. Sarah is really stressed out. You usually help keep things running around here. And actually, since I'm down here, I need to ask a favor. My car needs new brake pads, and I'm a little short this week. Can you front me 500 bucks? I looked up from the novel I was reading. No, Leo. I don't have the spare funds for your brakes right now. He frowned, shifting his weight. Come on, Mom. You live here for practically free. You don't have a mortgage hanging over your head like I do. The least you could do is pitch in when we hit a rough patch. I studied his face. He truly believed his own fiction. I am not giving you $500, I repeated evenly. He threw his hands up in frustration. Fine. I'll just put it on the credit card again. Unbelievable. He walked away, shaking his head. He was annoyed, but he wasn't panicked. He was completely confident that my usual $2,000 would hit his bank account on Friday morning, automatically covering his mortgage and his extravagant lifestyle. As his footsteps faded up the stairs, I pulled a cardboard box from under my bed. I carefully wrapped a porcelain figurine my late husband had given me and placed it inside. Friday was going to be an educational day. Friday morning arrived bright and crisp. I was sitting at a small table inside a local coffee shop directly across from my daughter Claire. She was reviewing the lease agreement for a beautiful sunlit one-bedroom apartment across town. Claire had always been the observant one. When I told her what I overheard, she didn't express shock. She simply offered to help me pack. My cell phone began to vibrate against the wooden table. The caller ID flashed Leo's name. I picked it up, pressing it to my ear. Hello, Leo. Mom, where are you? His voice was tight, bordering on frantic. I'm logging into my banking app and your transfer isn't there. The mortgage auto-pay bounced this morning. The bank is charging me an overdraft fee. I need you to push that money through right now. I took a slow sip of my black coffee. I canceled the transfer, Leo. The line went dead quiet for 3 seconds. What? Why would you do that? How am I supposed to pay the mortgage without your rent? You told Sarah that I live off you. I answered, keeping my voice perfectly level. You told her I would have nothing without your money. I stood in the hallway last week and heard every single word. Mom, he stammered, the panic in his throat catching. I didn't mean it like that. I was just stressed. You know how Sarah gets. You can't just cut me off. I need that money today. So now I answered, calmly refusing to absorb his manufactured panic. Let's make your words true. I will no longer burden you by living off your money. Mom, wait, please. I pulled the phone away from my ear and tapped the red button to end the call. I looked across the table at Claire. She smiled, sliding a pen across the table toward me. I signed my name on the dotted line of the new lease. The silence that followed was the sound of my son's reality shattering. When I returned to the house that afternoon, the atmosphere was suffocating. Leo and Sarah were waiting for me in the living room. They sat side by side on the expensive leather sofa, arms crossed defensively. The moment I walked through the front door, Sarah stood up. You cannot just stop paying rent without warning. She snapped, her face flushed with anger. We rely on that money to keep this household running. It is incredibly selfish to pull the rug out from under us because your feelings got hurt over a private conversation. I did not raise my voice. I reached into my purse and pulled out a single sheet of printed paper. I placed it gently on the glass coffee table in front of them. This is a ledger, I explained smoothly. It details the $80,000 I provided for the down payment of this property. It also lists the $24,000 a year I have transferred to you for the past 2 years, along with the estimated $400 a month I spent feeding you both. I do not pay rent, Sarah. I have been funding your lifestyle. Leo leaned forward, staring at the numbers in stark black and white. Mom, please. We can't cover the mortgage without your contribution. You know my salary doesn't stretch that far. Then you purchased a house you cannot afford, I stated. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the heavy brass house key, and dropped it onto the ledger. It landed with a sharp clink. "I am moving out," I said. "My things are already packed downstairs." Sarah's eyes widened in genuine horror. The bravado completely vanished, replaced by the crushing realization of their financial incompetence. "Moving out. Where you can't just leave us with this massive mortgage, I am leaving." I corrected her, turning toward the hallway, "because you both finally convinced me that I was a burden. Enjoy your independence." They stared at the metal key on the glass table, completely paralyzed, as I walked downstairs to gather my boxes. Claire arrived an hour later, driving a rented box truck. She parked directly in the driveway, the engine rumbling loudly. She walked into the house with a stack of moving blankets over her shoulder. She didn't offer a single word of greeting to Leo or Sarah, who were hovering nervously near the top of the stairs. Leo paced the hardwood floor, rubbing his temples. "Mom, please. Let's just sit down and talk about this rationally. You're overreacting. We can apologize. We can set up new house rules." "I'm not reacting, Leo," I answered carefully, carrying the box of my favorite books up the stairs. "I'm adjusting my living situation." Sarah tried a different tactic. She stepped directly into my path near the front door, forcing a tight, patronizing smile. "Grace, where are you even going to go? You need family around at your age. Let's not throw away our relationship over a silly misunderstanding." I stepped smoothly around her, handing the box to Claire. "I have my own apartment, Sarah, and it is entirely within my budget." I paused by the entryway table and reached behind the decorative vase. I pulled the main internet router from the wall, wrapping the thick black cord around the sleek plastic box. Leo stared at me. "What are you doing?" "I work from home on Fridays. The Wi-Fi account is in my name," I reminded him. "So is the cable, and so is the primary electricity deposit. I called the utility companies this morning. The internet and cable are disconnected as of noon today. The electricity will remain on, but they will be sending you a notice to put down a new deposit in your name by Monday." I placed the router into my tote bag. I did not yell. I did not hurl insults. I simply removed the invisible safety net they had taken for granted. I walked out the front door, leaving them standing in a quiet, disconnected house that they now had to manage entirely on their own. My new apartment was modest, but perfectly arranged. The morning sun poured through the large living room window, casting a warm glow over my small dining table. For the first time in 2 years, I woke up at 6 in the morning and did not have to tiptoe to the kitchen. I made my coffee, turned on the radio, and listened to the jazz station without worrying about Sarah sighing heavily from the top of the stairs. My phone buzzed on the counter. It was Leo. I let it go to voicemail just as I had done for the past 4 days. As I watered the basil plant on my balcony, I played his message. "Mom, please pick up." His voice sounded strained and exhausted. "The electric company wants a $500 deposit because my credit score took a hit last year." "I don't have it." Sarah is furious. "We're eating ramen because the grocery budget is gone. Just call me back. We need to figure this out." I deleted the voicemail. I felt no guilt. For years, I had buffered him from the consequences of his own financial irresponsibility. Claire came over that afternoon bearing fresh pastries from a local bakery. We sat on my small balcony drinking tea and laughing about a television show we both watched. I realized in that moment that I hadn't genuinely laughed in months. The chronic tension that had settled in my shoulders while living in Leo's house was completely gone. I felt a deep, settling peace. I was discovering the quiet joy of a life where my resources belonged exclusively to me. I had reclaimed my time, my money, and my dignity. As Claire gathered her things to leave, my doorbell rang. I assumed it was the building superintendent checking on a maintenance request I had submitted. I walked to the door and pulled it open, a smile still resting on my face. But it wasn't the superintendent standing on my new welcome mat. Sarah stood in my hallway. She wore her expensive designer coat, but it couldn't hide the deep bags under her eyes or the frantic energy radiating from her posture. She looked entirely out of place in my quiet, unassuming apartment complex. She forced a bright, entirely fake smile. Grace. Wow, this place is cozy. May I come in? I leaned against the doorframe, physically blocking the entrance. I did not unlatch the screen door. What do you want, Sarah? Her smile faltered slightly, but she quickly recovered, adopting a tone of exaggerated warmth. We miss you, Mom. The house is so empty without you. Leo is incredibly stressed with work, and I think we all just need to put this behind us. Family belongs together. We talked it over, and we are willing to lower your rent to $1,500 a month if you come back. I stared at her. Even in the midst of their financial collapse, she still viewed me as a tenant. She still wanted control, masking her desperation as a favor to me. She was attempting to negotiate the price of my own subjugation. I am perfectly happy here. Sarah, I told her, my voice gentle but unyielding. I enjoy the quiet. I enjoy my space. But you belong with us. She pressed her voice, rising in pitch, as panic seeped through her polished exterior. We have that huge guest suite just sitting there. It doesn't make sense for you to pay for an apartment when we have the room. It makes perfect sense to me, I replied. I am not your tenant, Sarah, and I am certainly not your ATM. Her face hardened, the mask finally slipping. We are going to lose the house, Grace. Then you will have to downsize, I answered. It is a difficult process, but you will survive it. I gently pushed the door closed before she could protest further, hearing the lock click firmly into place. But I knew Leo well enough to know he had one last trick. When I moved into Leo's house 2 years ago, I had parked my reliable mid-sized SUV in the driveway. As time went on, I found myself walking to the local market or taking the bus, leaving the vehicle sitting idle for weeks at a time. It remained parked in their driveway when I left. 2 days after Sarah's unwelcome visit, my phone rang. It was Leo. I answered it, curious to see what strategy he would attempt next. Mom, he began, attempting to sound authoritative and businesslike. Since you left your car here and you're clearly not using it, I'm taking it down to the dealership. I'm trading it in for cash to cover this month's mortgage payment. I need you to sign the title over to me today. He spoke with such staggering entitlement. He genuinely thought he could simply claim my property to plug the holes in his sinking ship. I cannot sign the title over to you, Leo, I said. Mom, stop being difficult. He snapped, his frustration boiling over. You abandoned the car. I need the money. It's the least you can do after leaving us high and dry. Leo. I interrupted, my voice sharp enough to cut through his rant. Look out your front window. What? Walk to the window and look at the driveway. I heard the rustle of the phone, his heavy footsteps crossing the hardwood floor, and then the sound of the blinds snapping open. I sold that car to an online dealership 3 days ago, I informed him. The title is already transferred. The tow truck should be pulling up to collect it right about now. Through the phone, I heard the loud, unmistakable hiss of air brakes as a flatbed tow truck reversed into his driveway. I heard Leo let out a string of vicious curses as the reality finally hit him. I had severed every single string he thought he held. He had nothing left to bargain with. 6 months later, the suburban house was sold. Leo and Sarah couldn't secure a loan to cover the deficit without my income padding their applications. They sold the property just weeks before the bank could initiate foreclosure proceedings. They lost the equity they thought they had, forcing them to move into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment much further outside the city limits. I sat at my favorite corner table in the local cafe, a steaming cup of chamomile tea resting beside my sketchbook. I had taken up watercolor painting. My days were entirely my own, governed by my interests, rather than the demands of a household that didn't respect me. The bell above the cafe door jingled. Leo walked in. He looked older, humbled, and exhausted. His expensive suits had been replaced by a simple sweater and jeans. He spotted me and walked over, pulling out the chair across from mine. He didn't ask for money. He didn't demand anything. He signaled the waitress and ordered a black coffee, paying for it from his own wallet. "You look good, Mom," he said quietly, staring down at his mug. "I feel good, Leo," I answered honestly. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. He told me about his new commute, about Sarah taking a second job, and about the reality of balancing their own budget. He sounded tired, but for the first time in years, he sounded like an adult. The dynamic between us had fundamentally shifted. I was no longer a burden to be managed, and he was no longer a master to be appeased. We chatted for 20 minutes before he had to leave for work. He hugged me goodbye, a genuine embrace, without hidden motives. I watched him walk out into the crisp morning air. I picked up my brush, dipped it into the vibrant blue paint, and touched it to the paper. Setting a boundary didn't break my family. It saved me.